Yep, put a ring on it is what, when you're courting, you hope happens at the end of that courtship period. You hope the man will actually put a ring on it. That's what we're talking about in our relationship segment today with Chris Hart, relationship expert. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy New Year.
And to you too.
Good to see you. Did you enjoy the holidays?
Oh yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, I had a good time this
You had a good time?
Yeah.
So put a ring on it. When talking about courtship, Chris, what's the difference between that and dating?
Oh, right. That's an interesting question. People use the terms a bit, they mix them up.
Yeah?
Courtship's a wonderful old-fashioned word, isn't it? But I think dating is more casual. Dating is what you do when you're just going out with your friends, to be honest, and you've no real intentions. Courting is where you've got very serious. You actually think this is the one.
Yeah. So courtship is when you're getting to the point, you're thinking about marriage at courtship. Unlike dating. Dating, you're getting to know, or you're having fun, or, whatever. I think dating is, you go out clubbing, you go out doing all sorts of crazy things, and you actually have no intention of getting married. Yes.
It's not on your mind at all. If somebody asked you, you'd say, oh, no, 5 years, 10 years, long time.
Yeah.
But if you're going out with the intention of finding a spouse, then really you're courting.
You're courting. And remember, you can be part of this discussion as we continue with Chris. I think we'll be having our phone lines open. The numbers will be on your screen. You can also tweet me at Sophia Wanuna at KTN Kenya. Use the hashtag Morning Express KTN. I will put your question to Chris, and you'll get to hear what he has to say. So, of course, courting in itself, when you're talking about getting to a place where you want to get married, marriage is serious. It's a big thing. It's meant to be for life. But we've seen, of course, it doesn't quite pan out that way for many. More and more cases of divorce in the recent years. Why is that? First, even if you just look at the picture ahead, in terms of, we see a lot of marriages breaking up. Is it that because the courtship period is not serving its purpose?
I suppose you could say that, really. First of all, globally, divorce actually isn't increasing. In fact, globally, in many cases, divorce is declining.
Really?
But partly that's because a lot of people don't actually get married anymore. An awful lot of people are not as they're not as keen on the traditional, formal, legal wedding. And so there's an awful lot of people around the world who are cohabiting for life, maybe. But the next question is, why do people get into difficulties with their relationships at all when they've got this idea that this is a permanent relationship? Why does it go wrong? And I think the basic reason is the wrong choice. It always comes back to the wrong choice. You've chosen the wrong person. So I think that's the real purpose of courtship, is to be sure that you are actually choosing the right person.
The right person. So how do you go about that? I've met this guy. He's wonderful. Of course, the first few weeks are amazing. It's honeymoon, and you're thinking, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. But the courtship, as you said, that period that then you get to weigh. So what, as a woman, as a man, are you looking out for in this particular period? Because other than the goosebumps and the good feelings and the good love, I mean, there has to be that element of, evaluating and looking deeply into this person, their character, and who they are. Yeah?
I think the problem really is this. You shouldn't really move into courtship until you're sure. So in the early days, literally the first minutes, the first hours, the first few days of knowing somebody, you should be very evaluative. You should be really looking at this person quite coldly, to be honest. Now, yes, you might be feeling tremendous goosebumps and all the rest, but you've actually got to stand back and say, is this actually the right person? Because the right decisions are always made very early. If the right decision is made literally in the first minutes, the rest's going to go beautifully. But if you've made a mistake at that point, then really you're playing catch up for the rest of the time. And honestly, you find yourself in a situation where you're wriggling out and you're under a lot of pressure to stay in the relationship, and actually deep down you know you shouldn't.
So sort of like take an adversarial position somewhere
right at the beginning. You should be very negative. You should actually be looking for reasons not to continue. Does this person, man, woman, do something that I really don't like? And if the answer is yes, then don't waste any more time at all. You know, it's very easy in all the rush of excitement at the beginning to say, oh, you know, forget, you know. No, don't do that.
And at early stages also, you find many people are forgiving. Many things will be like, it's okay, don't worry. But later on, they'll be like, don't talk to you.
No, I mean, forgiving is lovely.
Yeah.
You should always be very forgiving, but not at the beginning of a relationship.
Not at the beginning.
No, I mean, for example, you get in touch, you get started with somebody, and then they don't keep in touch, and they drop dates, they turn up late, they are cold towards you. Don't go any further. If you see signs that they really do not care for you the way you care for them, don't go any further.
Okay, so when you talk about the period in which you have to be very careful before you get into courtship, what period of time are we talking about? After you've known this person, say I'm a woman who I know I want to get married.
Yes.
Okay, and I met this lovely man. So we start going out for dates. So until what time then do I get into this different stage of courtship?
I think the best period to make your mind up is very early.
Okay.
So literally the first date. You know, if things are not right on the first date, don't waste any more time.
Okay.
Now, you then go on for several weeks as you learn more and more about one another, and at some point, usually it's, like I say, a few weeks, you will suddenly make a decision. You'll find yourself thinking, you know, I don't want this person going out with anyone else. I want it to be a unique relationship. That's when the change occurs. And that moment has to be marked in a relationship. If you don't actually have a conversation which says we've passed that point, then things will probably go rather weird. You know, for example, you might end up being very committed and the other person isn't. And you don't know that.
Yeah.
Now, you don't want to be there.
Exactly. So, you don't want to be the person who's so in love.
And the other guy thinks, this is nice, but, you know, no, you don't want to be there. So after a few weeks, when I mean, it sounds awful, but you've checked out the family and you've checked out the employment and the income and the social graces and all the other things, and you realise, this one's okay. You have to have that conversation.
Okay. So it's good that you say that, because a lot of people will just sort of like flow. So they meet, and at some point he's going to introduce her as my girlfriend, and you didn't have even that conversation about, are you my girlfriend now? You know, and then he's looking at me like, am I your girlfriend? You know, it becomes awkward. So very important to define. That is what you're saying. Key at the point when you're transitioning into this. Let's get into you were about to say something.
Well, you see, before that, you're in a different sort of relationship. I mean, for example, there are no rules about monogamy for the first 2 or 3 weeks of a relationship. If I go out for a cup of coffee with you, that doesn't stop you going out with somebody else, does it? So for those first few weeks, maximum say 6 weeks, you and I could be seeing all sorts of people, doing all sorts of things. But
if I know that, Chris, to just stop you there, if I met you and fancy you, of course at the first date I'll know if I do or not, and then next week, or I'm passing by, you know, one of these restaurants and I'm seeing you with another man, you know, having, you know, chit chat, or another woman, isn't that gonna just ruin what you had initially begun if you're still gonna be seeing other people who's not monogamous?
I think you have to be sort of, I nearly said rational, but you just have to accept that in the very early stages of a relationship, this is not defined. It is perfectly okay for you to be drinking coffee with 2 or 3 people. But there comes a moment when you think, I don't want that to be happening anymore. I'm actually thinking about this person as a long-term committed relationship. The split second you have that thought is the day you have that conversation.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
You change the rules.
You change the rules and have a conversation. Don't just assume.
No, you must not assume. Because you see, if I say to you, hey, we're an item, I think, do you agree? You say yes, and then I say, right, now if we're an item, I don't want to see you out with anyone else. I make it very clear that I'm taking a stand on that.
Okay.
And of course, I've got to be willing to do the same myself.
You see, it's easy, I think, for men to have those conversations, for a man to be the one. As a woman, you're in a position where you feel like, okay, I don't want him hanging out with other women. But as a woman, you feel like, if I say that, then it feels like I'm the one, you know, making the first move. And, you know, African traditional, you want to be the man, to be the one to come.
You know, I know traditionally the man is supposed to take the lead, but in practice the men do not take the lead.
Okay. I understand we have a call. So good morning. All right, we have lost. Was it Jackson? Please call back. We'll take your call. Keep calling. The numbers on your screen. We look forward to hearing your questions, and of course, Chris will seek to answer them. Yes, Chris, I stopped you when you were talking about people want, every woman. You want the man to come and say, yes, "Now, Sophia, I love you."
I know, but you see, there is an unwritten rule which nobody seems to know, which says that actually it's the woman who makes the decisions at every stage of the relationship. So although the man will end up down on his bended knees, will you marry me? The truth is that it's the woman who makes the decisions. So that is true right back at the moment when your eyes met. If the lady's eyes don't say come, he won't. Similarly, a few weeks later, the first person to raise the issue, we should be monogamous, is usually the woman. She probably won't say it boldly, rather bluntly like that, but she'll start saying things like, "Where's this relationship going?" Then you start the conversation. And he's going to have to play his cards. He's going to have to say, "Yes, okay, that's how I feel."
That's how I feel. I understand we have another caller. Let's try that one. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for calling. Please tell us your name and your question.
Okay, my name is Peter Mgendi from Mombasa.
Yes, Peter.
I have 2 questions. Is there such a thing as the one when it comes to your life partner? And how do you differentiate your life partner from probably the rest of the other potentials out there? And the second question is with regard to you being in the courting stage. How does one still maintain a relationship with the opposite sex and still have a good relationship with other people of the opposite sex?
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter, for calling in. Your questions will be answered by Chris. Thank you. And keep calling. The numbers are on your screen. You can tweet us at KTN Kenya at Sophia Wanuna. So we'll finish on that before we get into Peter's questions. So you said the woman, in essence, has that power. At the end of the day, things will go pretty much at her pace. She has a way in which she could lead and guide subtly, in a subtle way, not, I want this to go to the next level.
Yes, it's very important, actually, that she does understand that that is what she's supposed to do. Because an awful lot of women find themselves in ambiguous relationships that don't go where they want because they don't say what they want. You must do that. So, for example, if you don't have that conversation where you say, "Hey, we're an item, I don't want you out with anyone else," the guy will think he's still able to do that. So months later you could discover he's still chatting up other girls. And he doesn't realize that actually the relationship has moved on.
It's moved. Let's talk to Peter's question. Is there such a thing as the one for me, the life partner?
Sort of yes and no in a way. There are actually thousands of people in Mombasa, Nairobi, who would be a perfect match for you, for example. The question is, how do you meet one of them? And when you've met one of them, they become the one. There are still others, quite frankly. But there is definitely a group of people who are perfect for you. They've got the right mix of personality, background, whatever, that matches you.
So there is the one, but there could be several the ones.
There are a lot of them. Yes.
All right. And how do you differentiate? He's talking about getting to the place of knowing that this is the person I want to be with, but yet at the same time there are all these other amazing women. So who gets the edge? How do you cut that line?
I mean, it's a process, isn't it? The first cut is all about attractiveness. Am I attracted to this person of the opposite sex? Are they the shape and size that matches what I find attractive? And then you find yourself going through successively deeper layers of what makes them the one. Initially it's all very superficial, it's just meeting and saying one or two things and liking it. But then you start asking very serious questions. Do you match the template of what I want?
So you must have a template. Peter needs to have a template first.
Yes, we all do have one, but most of the time we don't know what it is. We don't actually think about it. We don't say out loud to ourselves what it is I'm looking for. And the moment you've articulated what it is, then it all becomes much clearer.
Okay.
And of course, there is a possibility that your template is not the right one. You know, you're looking for the wrong sort of person. Like, for example, a lot of girls look out for very masculine men, but that comes along with a lot of baggage.
Yes, it does, because everybody else wants that man. Let's take another call, I understand, before we answer the last of Peter's questions. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
What's your name and question, please?
My name is Mary.
Mary?
Yeah, I'm calling from Heaven.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, most of the time, when you say yes to a child, they usually end up like you stop doing what they used to do for the statement. Like if they used to call you often, they don't call you, they used to buy you things from the state. So what do you do to keep the guy interested after you say it?
Okay, Karen, I think I get what you're asking. I mean, Mary, thank you very much for calling. Mary's talking about, you know, this guy, you meet him, and at the beginning they call, and you're going for dates, and at some point they don't. But we'll answer her question. Let's finish with Peter's final question. He asked about how to maintain a relationship with a special significant other and still have other friendships with the opposite sex, which will not threaten this very important relationship.
You know, that's actually quite a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And it follows on from that conversation we were just describing.
Right.
Because, for example, if you and I agree that we're an item, and we agree that we are going to be monogamous, we've actually also got to define what monogamous is. So in other words, at what point when I'm talking to another girl do I slip over the edge and annoy you? Now, if you define where that edge is, then I can go on having good friendships with other ladies, and you will never be upset because I'm mindful of where that boundary is. Now, it's quite a subtle thing because, for example, if I'm having a cup of coffee with a lady at work and there's obviously business being discussed, that's clearly okay. Now imagine having the same conversation in a coffee shop at 5 o'clock in the evening. It's getting a bit iffy. Now imagine the same conversation at 9 o'clock in the evening over a glass of wine with a candle. Definitely the wrong sign. So you and I need to have a conversation where we find out where that boundary is for you and for me.
For you and for me.
And so long as then in the future I stay to the right-hand side of it, as far as you're concerned, with all the other ladies, you will never, ever be worried.
And also there's always the question of those who have best friends of the opposite sex. So, for example, I have a best friend who's a guy, and so of course we're very close, we'll talk a lot, we'll meet up a lot, and then there's my boyfriend or my partner. How does that pan out? Will that always be a comfortable situation?
It can get quite awkward.
Yeah.
I mean, best friends are often, to some extent, exes. There's been a little bit. Well, yes. I mean, if you get very emotionally intimate with somebody, you're going to slip over the edge sooner or later. Now, where you define that edge again is another issue. But yes, people do find best friends of the opposite sex very uncomfortable. The plain fact is that, as people say, men and women can't be friends because sex will always get in the way. Because you can't be best friends with someone.
Always assume there's something more.
Not only do other people always assume, it's always in one of your minds.
Really?
Yes.
No.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
People keep having these little thoughts, and eventually most friendships of that sort drift into some form of intimacy. So the real one finds them very uncomfortable.
So the best thing is to avoid that?
Yes, you've got to define them. You've got to say to your best friend, hey, I'm actually going out with so-and-so. You and I are going to have a different sort of relationship.
Okay. To Mary's question, you met this guy at the beginning. He's calling all the time, hanging out, and then those calls reduce significantly. Do you take that as no longer interested?
Pretty much. Yeah. I think if the calls start to diminish, if the guy stops paying attention, it's basically a message that he's no longer interested, and you should take that very seriously. I mean, what it really boils down to is this: a relationship that is a courtship makes constant progress. You go from the first meeting to that conversation to all the other steps in the courtship, and always there is this sense that you're getting closer and closer to a wedding. The split second that you slip off that that line,
great,
then it's over.
Okay, so there needs to be some consistency, some growth, not boo, and then you're the one fighting for getting him back. But let's go back to the courtship discussion, and in as far as how long, because many people struggle with that. There are those who believe in the school of thought that if I know this is a person I want to get married to, why should I be in courtship for a very long time? 6 months, 1 year, let's get married. Then there are those who want 5 years, they're still courting.
Yeah, well, the trouble is, after 5 years, you're not courting.
What are you?
You're doing something, but I'm not sure what it is.
It's not courting.
You're not courting.
Yeah.
Courting goes on a very firm timeline.
Okay.
It, broadly speaking, takes 12 months to the point where you make a decision to marry. You actually have a proposal. If it allow a few months either way, because we're all human. But if it drifts to 2 years, 3 years, then in all probability you're never going to marry. You're going to drift into some other sort of relationship. It might be a cohabitation that lasts forever, but it might not. And it might be just something that peters out after a wasted 5 years. So if you're going to do it properly, have that time frame in mind, that over the course of the first year you basically, sounds awful, but you're trying each other out. You're spending a lot of time together. You're seeing the rough and the smooth. You're discovering whether it's going to work. And around about 12 months you should be making a decision. 18 months maybe if you're a bit rather long distance apart or something like that. But on that sort of time scale. And then you should marry within a few months after that. Once you've made the decision to marry, we'll do it.
Do it. Go ahead. And you mentioned the long distance part, and the question in that, the dynamics, would they shift? Do they change? And as far as, because the people who are together and will see each other often, then 1 year, good. You've talked about 18 months for the people who are long distance. But if most of the time you're apart, doesn't that then affect
yes, it does,
but getting to know each other process?
Yeah, but you have to ask yourself whether there's any point to it. If you're in a long-distance relationship with someone, and because of that you can't actually make a decision, and it all gets stalled, then actually you're wasting time, because how are you ever going to make the decision?
Right.
You see, I think the moment you're in a long-distance relationship and you realize that this is a potential marriage, you've actually got to start making arrangements to get together. There's got to be a plan.
There needs to be a time where you're together before you get married for a long period of time.
And you've got to say to yourself, okay, your contract comes to an end in so many months, whatever it is, we will then be together. And if you can't say something like that, then to be honest, you're wasting your time. I mean, what is the point of having a relationship with someone in Perth or something, you know? It's nice, but it's not actually going to produce a family or a mortgage, is it?
Yeah. Okay, but there are people who still find themselves in those kind of situations. When two individuals may want to get married, courtship, of course, in that period, there will be deal breakers that will be presented. And what we see in many cases is that as a woman, they'll say, I'll change him, or that will change, or, things will get better. So is it also, as you were telling Peter, to be very clear with what it is he's looking for in a woman, because then that makes it easier for him to identify that one? Is it also important to be clear about what we do not want, what we cannot stand in this particular period, and so that when that shows up, then we're very clear that this cannot continue?
I mean, underlying what you're asking is this idea about whether people change or not. And basically in courtship they don't. So if you see something, particularly early on, that is indicative of a problem, don't waste any time, because it will not change. So if you meet someone in a bar and they drink heavily and are very sophisticated with alcohol, and we know exactly what the problems are going to be 5 years later. So why waste your time? It leads back to this point we were making earlier. Make the decision early. Rule people out rather than rule them in. So if you see drunkenness, laziness, any of the things that are obviously going to cause real problems later on, don't go any further. People do not change.
People do not change. Then why is it that we see that all the time? Because, somebody will, for example, you're a very neat man, you don't like to have dishes around, and you have clothes around littering the floor and all, and you have this woman who's not quite Proverbs 31, if you know of that verse, that will do all of this house chores and cook and do everything. But you keep encouraging and hoping that, hey, she will want to do this, or this and this will change. But for a while, people are able to tolerate that, and they're okay. But it is later on, it then becomes irritable.
Yes.
And then you start...
what it is that you have to split the problems into two groups.
Right.
There are those that are part of your personality. They cannot be changed. So if, for example, you fly off the handle very easily, get used to it. It's going to happen for the rest of your life. I'm going to have to put up with that.
You're going to have to put up with that. Let's take this call, then we'll continue on that. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Please give us your name and question, please.
My name is Anthony from Kakamega.
Anthony, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Yes, I just have one question, please. I just want to ask, if you try to tell your partner the whole truth about you on the first date?
Right.
About yourself in case your information on the first date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that all?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for calling from Kakamega. Before we get to Anthony's, let's finish on what you were saying.
Okay, yes. Well, some things are part of your personality. They cannot be changed. Be very clear about that. If somebody is angry, if somebody's introverted, if somebody's anxious, these are things that are not basically going to change.
Right.
And you must get used to them. If you're comfortable with them, whatever they are, then fine. But if you're not, they're not going to change.
Right.
Another group are things that are basically habits, like leaving your clothes around. That can change. But you don't change that by rowing and being angry. You change it by dog training, to be honest. In the same way as you train your cat to use the litter tray, you can train your wife to put her clothes away.
Okay.
And that's what you have to do.
All right. So I like that you separated those two, because so there's where people can change and things could be trained.
Yes.
To do things differently. Then those, it's just who they are. It's not going to change. All right, Peter, Anthony in Kakamega asks about the first date. Do you tell all truth in the first date? And I'll remember the last conversation.
Yes. I'm going to say it again. Because I think the basic rule is that if you are in a relationship where you expect it to be serious, you expect it to perhaps end in a marriage, rule 1 is tell the truth. Rule 2 is don't hide anything. So when things when it gets to the right point to start talking about things, say them out loud. And if that's on the first date, then say it on the first date. And like we were discussing last time in the context of children, you know, slip it into the conversation so that it's there. You don't make a big thing of it. But
you don't go like, now
I have to tell you.
I have to tell you this. I have children.
No, you just slip in. Oh, you know, I need to watch the clock because I've got to go home and look after my daughter.
Exactly. It's a natural conversation.
And then all the important things are on the table as fast as possible. Later on, you can go into endless detail. But at the beginning, just set the scene so that you both know where you stand.
Yeah, and what you're getting yourself into. So, Anthony, I hope that answers your question. Try and give that all information first date, but very subtle way of doing it.
And I mean, the other side of that is that if you and I are having a first date and you really are piling in all sorts of stuff, I'm going to run for the hills. Or if you start laying down the law about how I must behave and what I must do and the fact that you don't like the tie I'm wearing and all that stuff, I'm running for the hills.
There are people like that.
Yeah, there are.
They will you know, as my woman, I expect you to do this and this. This is what I like. When I wake up in the morning, they're thinking, oh my gosh,
right. Well, if that happens on the first date, you're on the wrong sort of date.
Yeah, totally. You're going to run. And also in courtship, it's one of those period of time that other than you, the couple, getting to know each other, there's other persons of interest. You have your friends and family. So people who are looking into this and they know, okay, so these two want to get married, and they will have different opinions. There will be those who will be in support of this new love, and then there will be those who are not. There will be those who will have that, if I may put it that way, some not very good things to say about your partner. When somebody comes to you with this kind of information about your partner, do you sit and listen, or do you say, they come and say, you know, I have some things to tell you about so and so. Do you sit, listen, take it in? How do you handle this kind of situation?
Well, you certainly do sit and listen. I mean, this is the second half of the courtship process, actually. The first half is all about relatively superficial things, like figuring out how you like to spend your time and all the other things. And then you get past the point where you begin to think it's a really serious thing, and you've had that conversation we talk about. What you then do is you start hanging out. You spend a lot of time together. You don't go out on dates anymore. Well, of course you do, but you know what I mean. You actually do boring things like go shopping and wash the car. And you spend time with family and friends. And it's then that you start looking to see, how do people fit in? How do your friends react to this person? How does he, she react to them? And yes, you really do listen to how the family's reacting to them, to their friends are reacting to them, and so on, because you can learn a lot from that. You, to be blunt, have still got your sort of rose-tinted blinkers on.
Yeah.
They haven't. So they will spot him doing things that you are not noticing. And if, for example, he's already chatting up the bridesmaids, you know, well,
then you know what's going to happen. All right. And also very important, other than that, what people will be able to observe as you're courting, there will be those who will come to say of things they knew of you before, of things you did before. I mean, these are things in the past, but some people will use that as a basis to interpret and to say, this is a kind of situation you're getting yourself into. Are you sure you want to get in there? So how do you treat that information?
Well, yes, it's very important, but actually you shouldn't need to go there. You see, in the early stages, all this should come out. In your first conversations together, you should be revealing all the interesting things that have happened to you in the past. So if I've had a poisonous ex and a very strange relationship, I should tell you about that. Not on the first date, but by the time we have made the decision as to whether or not we're an item, you should know about this. So that when your best friend starts spilling the beans on me, you can be more relaxed and say, oh yes, I've heard about this, but do tell me more. You know?
Okay, so listen, be ready. So then are you saying that the person, I should, if I'm getting into that kind of a courtship situation, tell all that was in the past that is likely to come up?
Broad brush.
Okay.
You know, you need to know that I've been in 2 or 3 relationships. You need to know, broadly speaking, how they went and why they failed. Not in any detail, though.
Okay.
But just enough so that when somebody starts telling you about my indiscretions at college, you think, oh yes, I've heard that before.
I know that. All right, counseling. Should people in courtship go for counseling together? Should they be talking to somebody who's sort of going to be like a mentor, guiding them through this?
In a perfect world, no, it's not necessary. In a perfect world, you've already got some very clear role models around you. You've got brothers, uncles, parents who are, in effect, showing you how relationships work. If in a perfect world, you're already talking to one another very competently, you're beginning to talk about the really important things, like how you're going to manage your finances and when you're going to have children and all those other things that you must talk about and before marriage.
Good, those should come at courtship.
Oh yes, very much. And if you're doing that and everything's going well, then there's no need to talk to anybody. But if you start running into any difficulties at all, then I would suggest, yes, go and talk to a counsellor. It could be somebody in your church, it could be a psychologist. Depends on what the context of the problem is. But yes, if things are not absolutely straightforward, talk to a counsellor.
Talk to a counsellor. Our time is up, Chris, but you're parting short. At the end of the day, relationships, very interesting, dynamic, relationships are, in essence, interesting, dynamic, lovely to be in a good relationship. So for courtship, what do you tell somebody watching right now who's in that particular institution? What for you is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I think the most important thing all the way through is honesty.
Honesty.
If you are being strictly honest in the way you project yourself to your potential partner, and you're telling them the absolute truth and you're expecting the truth back, then there's every chance that you will make the right decision. Plus or minus. And that you will start off a marriage that goes very, very well. If you've got any sense that you can't say to your partner something, then you're actually saying this is not going to work. Literally, the first day you realise that there are some things you can't tell your partner, you should think seriously about ending it.
But honesty important and good to tell early stages, and important to also look at the relationship at the beginning from a not very...
I mean, the thing is this, the deeper you get into a relationship, the harder it is to end it. So try and hit the high points right early on, and if they don't go well, off you go.
Chris Hart, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Always a pleasure. We'll see you next week.